Hello.
We all know that Anakin Skywalker was defeated at the hands of Obi Wan Kenobi on Mustafar. What if he died during Order 66? Who would have caused his death? Would the Jedi Order survive, or would the Sith reign victorious? Special thanks to Lightsabers for sponsoring our 75,000 subscriber lightsaber giveaway. All the details are in the pinned comment down below. Our story begins in the dark night. The quiet wind of Coruscant buzzed through the air. All that was left to be heard was the sound of speeders bursting by. It was the end of the Clone Wars. Everyone could feel it. All was nearly right with the galaxy. Unbeknownst to the people inside the Jedi Temple, 4 Jedi Masters on the High Council had been slain by the Sith Lord and his new pupil. The silence in the air was cut through and the first sounds of blaster fire etched itself out across the thin air of the Jedi Temple. Clones poured into the temple and terror ensued. It was late at night, many Jedi were already sleeping. Those who weren't were meditating, and the rest were doing exercises of sorts. Confusion tore through the temple, and Jedi began to panic, seeing the men they served alongside get slain. As the chaos broke out, the Jedi Battle Master Sindrala called upon his temple guards for assistance, but there was already trouble. A Pawn Jedi Temple guard had already betrayed his cohorts and started to cut away at them, blasting them with his lightsabers and betraying them. The temple guard was already promised the information inside the Jedi archives by Lord Sidious. This particular temple guard was also promised the role of Grand Inquisitor within the coming Empire. How could he resist the bait? With the Jedi Temple guards distracted by one of their own betraying them, Jedi Master Sindralik and his 2 Padawans, Wee and Benny, encountered the Chosen One. Sindralik was initially relieved, but when Anakin ignited his weapon, he was brought into a new world of terror. He couldn't believe that Skywalker would just turn on him. He ignited his own weapon and blocked Anakin. His 2 Padawans also ignited their weapons as well. All 3 of them were distracted by the members of the 501st who were pouring into the Jedi Temple. Jedi were being slain by the minute, and this was an outrageous sight to all of them. Master Sindralik was a master of every form of lightsaber combat, but Anakin's overly aggressive assault pushed him off his balance. Not to mention, Skywalker had already wrapped his hand around the neck of one of his students, choking her while moving his incredible speed to cut down the other 3 Jedi. Skywalker knew there were 2 large challenges inside the Jedi Temple. It was Sindralik and Shaak Ti. If he could get rid of both of them, then he'd be able to complete his mission with no problems. Anakin's speed and ferocity was much too much for Sindralik, especially as Sindralik unprepared for this encounter, and when he watched his students slain before him, he fell victim to Skywalker's blade. Anakin cut across the temple to the row of rooms that belonged to members on the High Council. Only 1 Jedi from the High Council stood in his way. Anakin opened the doors to Shaak Ti's room and stormed in without permission. The Jedi Master was in a deep meditation, and she could feel everything around her. It was heart-wrenching, but she knew in this moment that Skywalker was coming for her. When Anakin burst into her room, she acted as if she didn't know he was coming, and at the last minute, she pulled her lightsaber out of a vase in her room and spun around, igniting it and blocking Anakin's strike. This completely caught Skywalker off guard. He knew Shaak Ti and how dormant she could be. He assumed he could just kill her while she was meditating. The Jedi Master used the Force and mustered up a blast that sent Skywalker tumbling out of the room. Had he been expecting it, it likely wouldn't have jarred him that much, but he wasn't expecting it. When he got to his feet, the 2 of them began their fight once again, their blades clashing against the others. Shaak Ti knew that Anakin was way too talented for even the likes of her own skill, and could only assume that he had killed Master Sindralik. Her only goal was to keep Anakin distracted, because she understood that the key to this assault was him. If he could be removed from the fight, then the temple could be secured and they could subdue Skywalker. Shaak Ti backpedaled across the temple using Form 3. She typically would have used Forms 2 and 4, but they wouldn't be useful here. She knew Anakin killed Dooku, who was the best user of Form 2, and Form 4 was overly reliant on aggressive strikes to disarm an opponent, which wouldn't be favorable for her in this situation. Her gracefulness with the blade and her elegance with her strikes would make her stronger in Form 3, even though that wasn't her selected form of choice. There was also another reason for Shaak Ti's decision to use Form 3, and simply, it was because of Obi Wan. He talked about it and how he and Anakin sparred all the time, and how Form 3 was essentially Anakin's cripple. He couldn't bypass it. Of course, he found weaknesses in it, but Obi Wan always insisted that Anakin's impatience was his greatest weakness. Shaak Ti remembered that in this moment and using his impatience to her advantage. It was hard for her to fight against Skywalker. His heavy strikes and aggressive blows nearly knocked her off her feet several times. However, she could see the tide of the battle changing. With Jedi leaping from their beds to defend their brothers and sisters, there was a significant upswing for the Jedi. While Shaak Ti was fighting Skywalker, a rocket exploded near her, sending a massive pillar down. Shaak Ti saw it, and while noticing Anakin's impatience, she slipped under a massive swing by him, getting behind him and pushing Skywalker under the pillar. As she did, it felt like he was crushed. She was unsure, but before she could do anything to make sure that he was downed, she saw a temple guard attacking his brethren. She couldn't believe it. Another traitor. Shaak Ti ran forwards to assist assist the other temple guards. The future Grand Inquisitor was holding his own brethren off. He was hoping for clone reinforcements at this particular time, but they were being held back. Without Skywalker pushing such a heavy assault for them, the clones were struggling to get to him, and the Grand Inquisitor was struggling and getting beat back, as his brothers and sisters realized his great betrayal. Shakti didn't have time to try and be merciful with him, and she surprised the Grand Inquisitor by cutting him through the back in one quick swing. The other temple guards, who were in the middle of their assault, cut through his chest, killing him immediately. Shakti at this moment knew she was the highest-ranking Jedi Master inside the temple, and began to issue out orders, asking if the guards heard anything from Kelleran Beck or Sindralik. The only thing they heard was Sindralik was slain by Skywalker at the mouth of the temple's entrance, and there was also no news revolving around Kelleran or Grogu. Shakti bit her lip, and then she pondered over Jocasta Nu or Terra Sinube. The guards did have an answer. They were taking younglings out the back. Surely with the clones being stopped, they were able to break free and escape the temple. As they finished their conversations, the sounds of tearing could be heard. They turned around and saw Skywalker emerge from the fire. He stepped out and his eyes were piercing yellow. The temple guards rallied behind Shakti, all of them igniting their weapons. Anakin was furious. Shakti told the temple guards that they didn't want to kill him, but their objective was to defend themselves at all costs. They understood their directive, fanning out and taking Form 3 as their main combatant pose. Shakti stood in the middle, changing her form to Form 4, one of her strong suits. She stared down Skywalker and told him that this was done. He had failed, and so had their little rebellion. He raged, but Shakti wasn't having it. She had been kind, virtuous, compassionate, and respectful towards him, and he still tried to kill her. She may have been one of the more maternal figures in the Order, but she had enough of it. Not falling into anger or rage, but disappointment, especially for someone respected so highly. Skywalker lunged across the room, seeing her aggressive stance, and in the moment he left his feet, she changed back into Form 3 and stepped back, catching him completely off balance. She moved into Form 2 and gracefully moved forward, shoving her blade against his. The temple guards began to strike at him, surrounding him and swinging. He may have been the chosen one, but even he could only try and keep this up for so long. The guards were too many, and with Shakti, their presence was far too much. Skywalker beat around, and before he could be cut down, a grouping of clones led by Commander Appa rounded the corner. Shakti, seeing Skywalker weak, used the Force to throw him back into his men. Some of the men were thrown off of the balcony to their deaths below. The temple guards moved in on the clones, deflecting blaster bolts and cutting them down. Shakti put her hand out, but she couldn't refute their initiative. It was their job, and the clones had betrayed them. The temple guards had to kill them. Skywalker started getting to his feet, and one of the guards, filled with anger, rage, and filled with revenge, lifted his blade up and shoved it down into Anakin's back. Shakti ran over to the guards, telling the guard to stop. He looked down at her and told her that he was far too dangerous to be left alive. Shakti dismissed the guard, telling him that if they fell into revenge, that it would only make them no worse than the traitors that were attacking them now. She turned Anakin over and felt his head, and then felt for a pulse, but all she could feel was the essence go cold. He was already cold because of the darkness, but this was ice. He was gone. While it's not that it was necessarily what she wanted, it was technically necessary. She called out to the guards and demanded that they secure the temple. It was their most important objective. Being that Appo and the squad that was with him were the only group of clones to get this far into the temple, the rest of them were in for a nightmare, as the remaining temple guards descended into the temple. There were initially 500 temple guards on Sindralik's team, however that number dwindled to slightly just below 250. Shakti's orders echoed out throughout the temple, and the Jedi reacted quickly to the orders. It was simple: push the clones to the Great Hall, and bring down the pillars. Shakti understood that the temple was just a building, and that the Jedi were the most important piece of the Order to survive. It didn't matter what happened to the temple. If they could bring down the pillars in the Great Hall, they could block the clones from entering the temple, and so it began. Shakti at this point, instead of contributing to the battle at hand, began looking for students that got separated from their cohorts. Shakti was also very notably disturbed by Anakin's death. The betrayal was something that she could truthfully understand. While not liking it, she understood Anakin's mindset. She didn't want to see him be killed. Surely he could have been forgiven or understood. The Jedi didn't seek out revenge, but now she saw the effect the Clone Wars had on all the Jedi. She also, having been the one to deal with the clones during their final stages of the developmental Camino into Poca City, didn't want to harm them. She couldn't. As she made her way through the halls, she saw clones cut down. It was a horrific sight. Mutilated bodies strewn about, younglings and Padawans executed, even without having held a weapon to defend themselves. Masters slain while focusing on the survival of their future generations. The sound of blaster fire echoed, but Shakti's mind ran still. There is an evil mind behind all of this. Shakti fell to her knees and removed the helmet of one of the clone troopers and looked into his dormant eyes. Her heart sank lower into her heart. She always recognized the clones as people, just as Plo Koon did, but she couldn't help but feel like it was all a setup. She heard footsteps approach her, and when she snapped back into reality, it was a group of younglings. They were so close to becoming Padawans, and that was all thrown away by the moment. They were running away. Shakti looked up and saw a group of clones behind them, leaping from her knees and over the younglings while igniting her lightsaber. She blocked blaster bolts, but she didn't want to kill the clones. She had no choice though. She didn't want to kill Skywalker, and the choice was made for her. Shakti used the Force to throw the clones from their feet and block the remaining shots into them, killing the few of them that still remained. When she turned around, the younglings ran up to her, wrapping their arms around her and crying. They were all scared, terrified of what was to come. Shakti kept her eyes peeled before deigniting her weapon and getting down to their level and wrapping her arms around them as well, giving them a sense of comfort, using her warming and soothing presence to fill their hearts with just enough confidence to handle what would come next. Shakti got up, keeping her hands on the shoulders of the students and telling them to continue forward. Their path was secured. All they needed to do was get to the archives, and they would be granted safe passage out of the temple. Shakti watched the children run. She couldn't help but wonder how strong she would have been when she was their age. Her class had 2 council members in it, Obi-Wan and herself. How would they have handled this at their age? There was a girl in the group. She seemed to be the strongest out of the 6. Maybe Reva had such potential in her future. Shakti turned around and looked at the clones on the ground. They were gone too. She continued going through the temple, searching for any younglings and Padawans left behind and astray, unable to escape, simply hiding from their hunters. As she was doing this, she got a communication from Keller and Beck, saying that Master Sunube was able to get Grogu out of the temple, along with the rest of the younglings. Shakti admitted that was positive news, but something was looming. The clones, having been pushed back, called the Emperor, informing him that Vader, Grand Inquisitor, and Commander Appa had been killed in combat. They needed reinforcements. So, Commander Fox and 2,000 clones were sent to the Jedi Temple, the gunships landing on the steps of the temple to join their brethren in the assault, which wouldn't go anywhere. The Jedi on the inside continued to barricade the temple, and while they did that, the remainder of the Jedi escaped. Thanks to a contact from Naboo, Jar Jar Binks, the Jedi were able to get granted safe passage off the planet. This was done through an array of civilian transports that were gathered and gifted to the Jedi to get them off-world to locations around the galaxy. Shakti, Keller and Beck, and 50 temple guards were all that remained inside the temple, and with the clones unable to get through the gates of the temple, after it having been locked down, the clones continued their siege. Palpatine, seeing no resolve in sight, knowing that the temple could survive a siege for decades, decided that he would bombard the temple himself. However, he didn't care that his men were still present on the steps of the temple. When 3 Venator-class Star Destroyers crept across the eerie Coruscant skies under the cover of darkness and hidden by the smoke emitting off the temple, they opened fire. The Jedi on the inside could sense the coming vessels, and they abandoned the temple as fast as they could. The clones, on the other hand, were able to breach, and when they got in, it was empty. Commander Fox relayed orders out to all of his troops inside the Coruscant Guard that the transmission was cut off as the Jedi Temple was set ablaze. All members of the 501st who hadn't died in the initial invasion, the survivors of wounds and injuries, and those still present on the steps, the Coruscant Guard, including every single member of the 2,000 men, and Commander Fox were obliterated in moments. The city watched as the Jedi Temple was leveled by 3 vessels. The clones serving inside the starships were taken aback when they heard the transmissions off the ground. Commander Fox was still inside the temple, and they felt great regret. Vice Admiral Rampart, who was leading the attack on the temple, quelled his men, telling them that it was not just the cost of war, but the price of treason, almost suggesting to the clones that they were simply useless, that they weren't living beings or respected as being such, even after following the Chancellor's orders. For members of the Coruscant Guard, they couldn't believe this, nor could they stand for it. They simply could not believe that their Emperor would selectively betray them. On the ground level of the city planet, the clones decided to mount up a rebellion against their Emperor. If he was willing to betray them, then he certainly wasn't fit to rule over a galaxy. Of course, these orders were issued out by captains and lieutenants, so not every single member of the Coruscant Guard was completely on board with this operative. Their mandate as a division was to be exclusively loyal to the Emperor, but their brothers were just killed in a bombardment of the Jedi Temple that was ordered by their Emperor. Of course, as clones, it was their duty to follow orders, but not even the Coruscant Guard could stand for this. Some of the ranking members of the Coruscant Guard were outwardly against going to the Chancellor's office to arrest Palpatine. However, the highest ranking officer, who was more loyal to Fox than the Palpatine, decided to arrest the Chancellor, and so they moved out, some of them begrudgingly following orders though. When the Coruscant Guard arrived at the Republic Executive Building, they marched themselves towards the Chancellor's office, and when the few leaders entered, they informed the Chancellor that he was under arrest, and Palpatine just didn't really care for such rhetoric, demanding that the troopers stand down, and when they raised their weapons, Palpatine snapped their necks. He didn't know there were several hundreds of more clones outside of his office. Palpatine, when he heard their boots coming, prepared himself for his own siege. The clones, seeing the dead bodies of their brothers, immediately turned on Palpatine, seeing him as a threat to their mere existence. They began to open fire. Palpatine had a severe advantage here. Only 2 clones could get through the door at a time, and he had a lightsaber and force powers, which they did not possess. The clones began to trickle in, and Palpatine ignited his second lightsaber and got to work. The sounds of clones being executed rang through the halls of the building. Palpatine began trying to make his escape, but couldn't. As the clones were being thrown from their office or being electrocuted or cut down, one of them sent out a distress signal. The signal was on the Republic military frequency, which the Jedi were on. Shaak-Ti got the message and saw that it was coming from the Republic executive building, and she stopped, telling the few guards that were with her that they needed to go. They didn't quite understand why would they do that, or why would it be a good idea to do that. But Shaak-Ti told them that if they went and found the Sith Lord, they could destroy the Sith, but in the end, it would likely cost them their own lives. She expressed that the clones there would likely turn on them and try to kill them. In her mind, it was a necessary risk, one that needed to be made for the greater good of the galaxy, and for the Jedi Order, of course. The Temple Guards and Keller and Beck agreed to this proposition. The Order would survive without them if they died. The future was secured with thousands of Jedi having escaped the Temple. They were Jedi. Self-sacrifice was practically in the name. If they stayed true to their mandate as Jedi, then surely they could take the Sith with them, and then provide the trauma-stricken children of the future of the Order with a more sustainable future. The Jedi would depart for the Republic Executive Building alone, Shaak-Ti leading Keller and Beck and 8 Temple Guards. When they arrived at the Republic Executive Building, it was chaos. The sounds of clone troopers crying out in agony and terror could be heard. They were trying to get reinforcements. A lightsaber could be heard swinging around, and an evil cackle rang out, louder than the sound of their suffering. When the Jedi exited their vessel, they saw clones fly from their feet, and a path was made. When electricity smacked into the ground and dozens of clones were fried to death. Sidious spun his lightsaber around, cutting through the few remaining clones in front of him. When Sidious turned, his joyful massacre turned into a heinous scowl. He stared at the Jedi in front of him and twisted his blade in his hand. Shocked, he stepped in front of the other Jedi. Keller and Beck and the 8 Temple Guards all ignited their weapons. Sidious would be their greatest foe, a masterful Sith Lord who was obviously the one that bested Windu, Fisto, Kolar, and Tin. The Sith Lord spun across the room and slashed his blade. One of the guards fell, 7 remained. The Jedi moved around, his speed and ferocity unlike anything they'd ever faced before. Kelleran used an offset battle meditation in this moment. He learned of it, but he didn't truly understand it, so the battle meditation only worked in half of its strength. The Jedi backpedaled. The incredible Sith Lord swung his weapons around. The benefit that these Jedi had was that they knew he was a Sith Lord, and they knew what they were getting themselves into when they arrived and saw what he was doing. While their duel was going on, a couple of the injured clone troopers saw the conflict. There were 2 men sitting next to each other, both of them having been pushed back into the wall. One of the men was watching the fight in awe. The Jedi arrived to save them, even after Order 66. The other clone was still slightly controlled by the inhibitor chip and raised his blaster. His brother saw this from the corner of his eye and looked over and told him to stop. The other one was confused, expressing that violating these orders would have them stripped of rank, court-martialed, and then executed for treason against the Republic. The other trooper shook his head, expressing that it was all a fabrication. It was corruption and their lives had to pay for it. Some of the men saw the truth upon fighting the Emperor. Others couldn't grasp the idea through the fog of the inhibitor chip. Another 2 Jedi were slain. Kelleran and Shaak-Ti tried to make a push on the Sith Lord, but Sidious knew that killing the Temple Guards would only thin out his competition. With 5 of them left, he was well on his way. The Jedi were doing everything in their power, but Sidious was far too much for all of them. He moved like a cyclone, tearing through their advancements. The clones who were watching had a choice to make. The 2 clones next to each other continued their discussion. However, the man who raised his weapon fired it. It clipped Palpatine's leg. Did he aim for Palpatine or the Jedi? The clone obviously made a choice. If he died, then he would die following the reason of which he was bred, to serve the Republic, not his leader. Palpatine's attack was jarred and his knee fell out from under him. This still did not deter Palpatine. He moved elegantly, cutting off one of the legs from 2 different Temple Guards and killing another one. However, because of the blaster, it put Palpatine into an unfavorable position. Shaak-Ti jabbed her blade down into Palpatine's shoulder, and his reaction had him cut her hand off and shoot electricity into her face. One of the few standing Temple Guards cut off Palpatine's hands and he was left in shock. The same guard dragged her blade back, and using the other side of the blade, she cut Palpatine down. The clones who were gathering their strength looked up. Kelleran grabbed Shaak-Ti and helped her up. The other guards helped their brothers and sisters up with the missing legs, and then retreated. The Jedi entered the vessel and vanished into the night. And the following evening, Yoda and Obi Wan would arrive to see their temple missing. However, a message sent out by Shaak-Ti upon their arrival to Coruscant and the wreckage would have them relocating the Dantooine, where they would meet one of 3 Jedi enclaves set up across the galaxy, the other 2 being held at Ahch-To and Tython. Upon Obi Wan's arrival, he'd be taken away to a secret location with his former classmate Shaak-Ti. She would have a lengthy conversation with him, one that would have him face heartbreak, sadness, understanding, and then acceptance. One thing that made Obi Wan's handling of this better would be the presence of Shaak-Ti. Her warming essence helped calm Obi-Wan's distraught heart. He personally couldn't believe it, but even without hollow recordings of the incident, he believed her. He understood that Anakin was under extreme stress. He wished he stayed on Coruscant, and he wished he said more, and even hoped that Ahsoka would have been able to get through to him. But none of that seemingly happened, and now he was gone. Of course he was a traitor, but like Obi-Wan, Shaak Ti too believed that he was just strung along a misguided path. While the Jedi were still being hunted, Obi-Wan had to leave Dantooine. He told Master Yoda and Shaak Ti why he was doing so, and they understood. Kenobi returned to Coruscant hidden, and arrived at Padme's apartment to confront her. He would inform her of everything that had happened the night before, and her heart too would shatter. Without Palpatine to drain her life, she wouldn't die, but she would be forced into a premature labor, which Obi-Wan tried to refrain from causing her to go into. He'd be by her side through the entire process, and she would have a healthy birth. While her birth was happening, the Galactic Senate was hearing testimonials from the survivors of the arrest that happened the night before. They would inform the Senate that it seemed like Palpatine was a dark Jedi, one who used evil powers and a red lightsaber. The Senate, based on this, would just assume that the Jedi were the ones who orchestrated the entire Clone Wars. Generally, the public perception of Force users wasn't too deep, and so being that Palpatine and Dooku used the Force and had red lightsabers, everyone just assumed that they were just Jedi, and that the Jedi started the war so they could control the galaxy. Meaning that as the Republic moved past the Clone Wars and ridded themselves of Palpatine's loyalists, they continued their hunt for the Jedi. Obi-Wan and Padme, learning of this, would bring her and her children to the new Jedi homeworld on Dantooine. And while there was an established Jedi temple on Dantooine, it was hidden and the public was rather unaware of it, considering it hadn't been in use since before the era of the High Republic. It wasn't even on most public databases. Padme would be welcomed to live with the Order, being that her children were so powerful with the Force, they feared for her life. The Jedi would make a special exception for her, allowing her to be a part of her children's lives as they went through their Jedi training. Inside the new temple, Yoda would reinstate a High Republic trait of the Jedi Order, making Shaak Ti and Obi Wan Kenobi Grand Masters of the Jedi Order. He knew his time in this galaxy was short, and he wanted to ensure the brightest future for the Jedi Order, with two of the minds that would likely see it into the future, a brighter one at that. As Jedi from across the galaxy would find themselves refuge here on Dantooine, the Republic would elect itself a new system of government, one that would be free from tyrants. However, the hunt for Force sensitives would begin after the Clone Wars ended. The Jedi would begin to take in new members regardless of how high their midichlorian count was, because they needed to save as many individuals as they could. Luke and Leia, as named by their mother, would begin their training inside the Jedi Order, and with their mother nearby and always proudly watching, they would excel. After decades of tension, the Republic would rescind its hunt for Force-sensitive individuals, and a new era of tranquility could begin, as the Jedi yearned for another chance at becoming, once again, Knights of Peace and Justice in the galaxy. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to Galavan Gaming, Tristan, Darth Revan, Pimp Daddy Bane, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Jedi Sloth, Mad Matty Studios, Anakin 003, Lemon Knight, Rex the Wolf, The Man with Three First Names, Dark Saint 46, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. Smash that like button. Let's talk about our story. So obviously the story had a lot of twists and turns, and that was intentional. I feel like everyone's covered Order 66 and been done in such a great number that I wanted to approach this differently. Everyone would have had Obi-Wan and Yoda come back and being the main fighters against Palpatine, and while that's cool and all, I wanted something different. I felt like that was just too cliche. I feel like at this point in the What If community, I feel like having Obi-Wan and Yoda being the main contributors would just be too cliche. And so, for that being so cliche, I figure it would be better if we had Shaak Ti and Kelleran Beck and other characters have the mantle for the episode. Obviously, Obi-Wan still has to have a moment because Anakin is his pupil, and so he obviously gets that moment. However, I think that having him and Yoda in the main spotlight kind of takes away from other people inside the Order, and kind of takes away from a chance of others to shine in the terror of Order 66. Obviously, the first part of this episode was very, very in-depth of Order 66, and there are some other videos coming out soon. One continued in the Earth series of Order 66 and a more in-depth look at it, one that is in the perception of one that's living in the moment that isn't Anakin or another main character. And that's something I always strive to do on this channel, is to talk about the characters that don't get enough spotlight. And so having a main focus on these other characters allowed them to kind of shine in the spotlight. And I think Shaak Ti and Kelleran could have certainly had their moment. And I don't believe that they could have all killed Palpatine. I wanted Palpatine to really feel like he had a really strong presence, which is why the Coruscant Guard wasn't able to stop him, and why it took 8 Jedi plus Kelleran and Shaak Ti to defeat him. Obviously, the killing of Anakin is going to be very difficult to get through because it's Anakin, and same goes for Sidious, especially with non-Yoda and non-Obi-Wan there. However, I still believe that it's completely feasible. Again, if Shakti isn't trying to just beat him and knows that stalling long enough is going to keep him out of the fight, then I think the Jedi Temple has a chance to survive. I think that Anakin is going to get worn out. I think that Anakin's going to get flustered and give into his anger and kind of have a similar moment like he did on Mustafar. The main emphasis being is Shakti's transition into Form 3, which before Vader became Vader was something he just couldn't really overcome. It's something that he struggled with against Obi-Wan. So anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this video. It's a little bit different take on the topic of Order 66, but you know, that's what this channel is all about. Anyways, I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.